Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's fifth episode of Cold War 2.0 with dear Tarik Cyril Amar. Tarik, how are you doing today?
Fine, how are you?
I know you're laughing. It looks some cinematic movie. This footage which I
Yeah,
played.
it's amazing.
I have 1 hour footage to show you guys tonight on Syriana Analysis, which I have the license via a website called viori.com. And I got the licenses on this website, and you can use footage basically coming from all around the world. And today they're publishing a lot of videos from Moscow. So I tried to really limit the number of videos, but those were the ones that I liked. They're like 1 hour. So tonight at 10 p.m., I believe in Central European time, these videos are going to come on this channel. But today, we're going to discuss lots of issues with you, Tarik. And for the audience, I just want to give them the titles of today's episode. First of all, we're going to comment on the EU officials' reaction to the Victory Day in Moscow. Then we will speak about the future German minister saying in the past that Russia will always be an enemy of Germany. And then we will discuss new German Chancellor's warning to Trump, telling him to stay out of Berlin's affairs. And also one of the famous politicians, which the German press says she is the most beloved politician in Germany, Heidi Reichinnek. She made the Merz election possible, according to many reports. And finally, as you remember, last week I played a video of the CIA encouraging Chinese officials to spy for the CIA, and now the Chinese hit them back with with a video, basically a parody video, mimicking the same video but talking about the United States just for entertainment purposes at the end of this conversation. Tarik, I'm going to show you a video now posted by Ursula von der Leyen herself on her X account. And she says 80 years ago, enemies laid down their arms. Since then, we Europeans have built something extraordinary, a union of peace, democracy, and solidarity, an anchor of stability. Our union was born as a peace project, and it remains one today. So this is the video. I just want to screen it, which is very interesting. And she received lots of commentaries and backlash on this video. Let's take a look.
Cette semaine, nous célébrons les 80 ans de la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Le 8 mai 1945, des dizaines de milliers de Françaises et Français marchent aux Champs-Élysées à Paris, submergés par la joie. Des célébrations avaient lieu dans toute l'Europe, de Londres au Benelux, en passant par Copenhague. Le cauchemar était enfin terminé. Les événements de cette époque ont eu des conséquences profonde pour tous les Européens. Pour la moitié de notre continent, c'était le début de la reconstruction et la réconciliation. Mais pour l'autre moitié, la libération du nazisme n'a pas apporté la liberté. Elle a été suivie par l'occupation et l'oppression. C'était un véritable tournant pour l'Europe. 80 years on, we stand as another decisive moment in the history of our continent. The war in Ukraine will eventually come to a halt, but the way the war ends will shape our continent for generations to come. The future of the Ukrainians is at stake, but so is ours. Because we know in our history, peace and European integration have always gone hand in hand. So let's bring Ukraine inside our union. Let's walk the path of peace together. Slava Ukraini, long live Europe.
As a journalist myself, when I watched this, I really tried to extract a question from the video, but I couldn't. I just wanted to ask you if there is something missing in this video, maybe an important piece of information.
No, let me start with something very simple and a little bit pedantic, but I have to get this off my chest.
Yes.
I actually speak Ukrainian.
Oh, nice.
I lived in Ukraine for, I don't know, together 5 years. And I lived in the west of Ukraine, in the city of Lviv, where people even then were speaking Ukrainian. You hardly heard any Russian there. That was just how the geography worked. And I can tell you one thing. I'm waiting for the day that Ursula von der Leyen will finally pronounce correctly, or at least almost correctly, this phrase, Slava Ukraini. Slava Ukraini. not Slava Ukraini or something like that. That is basically Americanized. And I think it's so telling, that she engages again and again in trying to signal how close she is to Ukrainians by using this horrible slogan. I will explain in a moment why it's horrible. But she can't even bother to ask a Ukrainian to explain to her for a few times, to show her for a few times how it's pronounced correctly. She can't bother. As little as Boris Johnson, by the way, and so on, right? Okay, got that off my chest. Second thing, the slogan itself, right, is of course fascist. It is a fascist slogan. It was really, it has a prehistory before World War II, but it's a very small prehistory, which nationalist apologetics always try to abuse to sort of obfuscate the issue, muddy the waters. But the slogan is most heavily associated by far with the fascist organization of the Ukrainian nationalists during World War II. During World War II, under Bandera, and there was a smaller wing under Melnik. And these people were fascists. I've had it with these idiotic, hair-splitting conversations. I've read a lot of their documents. I've read what they were saying. I'm actually an expert in this from a former life. That is what my dissertation at Princeton was partly about, and what my first book is partly about. These people were fascists. They were not the same fascists as the Italian fascists. They were not the same fascists as the Nazi fascists in Germany, but they were fascists. They were also nationalists. They were also ethnic cleansers. And they took part in the Holocaust. All of these things are true about the Ukrainian nationalists of World War II. This is not Russian propaganda. It's not. These things are true. These are historic facts. And I don't care if there are a lot of nationalist Ukrainians still running around who don't want to accept this. So what happened to the slogan then, right? Slava Ukraini, Slava Heroyam, which means glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. That's the full version, which everyone knows that that's the full version. An original fascist slogan from World War II, it was sort of repurposed in the so-called Euromaidan of 2013-14, right? And the argument was, and I remember having these arguments with some Ukrainians, that, yeah, maybe it was a bad slogan once, but we don't mean that. We mean it somehow democratically in a nice way now, right? And this isn't possible. First of all, it's not true. Of course, the Ukrainian far right has always meant the slogan in exactly the old far right way, and they've been playing this game to get everybody say it, right? And the other thing is, you can't actually repurpose a slogan like that. Imagine somebody said to you, oh, I'm going to end my speeches now with Sieg Heil in German. And you say to this person, hey, Sieg Heil is a Nazi slogan. We all know this. You can't say this. And the answer is, no, but I mean the victory, the Sieg of democracy. That must be okay then. I mean the Heil of civil society. Nobody would accept this. You can't repurpose a slogan like this. Anyhow.
Just quick commentary here. One of the German politicians from the AFD a few months ago, he said, I think all for Germany or something, and they came after him, right? And he was prosecuted.
Yeah, and it's exactly, language doesn't work like this. Okay, now back to what she had to say. Ursula von der Leyen, right, once asked to believe that the European Union was always a peace project. And half of that is true. Half of that is true, but she leaves out the other half. The half that is true is roughly that the European Union was one of its main purposes when it was founded. And of course, it was founded in precursor organizations. It wasn't always the European Union, but let's not go into this. When this thing was founded, it was founded to create peace and stability in Western Europe. Eastern Europe was a different question under Soviet control at the time. In Western Europe, and the anchor point of that was to get the Germans and the French to stop killing each other, right? That's at the core of the old European Union. Now, what she leaves out is that the European Union or its precursor organizations would never have gotten off the ground without the Americans. A lot of people in Europe still don't know this. Originally, this whole process of European unification, European convergence, whatever you want to call it, that begins in the late 1940s, is a very American project. and it would never have worked without them. And what the Americans want out of this is also stable Western Europe. They need this geopolitically, they need it to oppose the Soviets, they need it for markets. But of course, that is a Cold War creation. It's meant to also serve in the Cold War. This is why they made sure, among other things, and these are related projects, that the Eastern Europeans could not possibly really accept Marshall aid. Right? Yes. There is this legend that Stalin just prohibited it. Yes, Stalin didn't want it, but also the West designed it. They designed it. The then Foreign Minister of Britain was very clear about it, Bevins. They designed it so that they couldn't accept it in the East. They wanted them out, right? So this is very much a Cold War project. And all of this Ursula leaves out, right? Because she thinks Cold War is peace, I think. And so the next thing is, of course, the irony, the horrible irony that's behind all of this is, if there is one single person that has done most to pervert whatever the European Union was, it was never that great, into a very militant and militaristic organization, that's her. That's her. She is the grave digger of everything that actually was peaceful about the European Union. She is the grave digger. Second in line is probably Josep Borrell, if anybody remembers him. And then there are a lot of people in the European Parliament that are horrific warmongers, right? But if you ask about those who had a lot of pull, who actually drove the process, she is in top position. She has driven the process, and she's still driving it, of making the European Union a militaristic organization, of turning it into a military alliance through and through, and of course, of completely subordinating it to NATO and the Americans. Now that is now cracking apart, but that's not because of Europe. That's because of the Americans, right? On their end. We can talk about that as well.
I think you gave around 11 minutes of analysis, historical background, and political knowledge about this. But I think Kaja Kallas can beat your arguments in 40 seconds now. And I will show you her 40-second statement now, which she's expressing her dissatisfaction and disappointment with European leaders going to Moscow today. Let's take a look.
Understand. I mean, I would say that all those who are supporting freedom, independence, all the European values should today on the European Day be in Ukraine rather than in Moscow. And I can tell, standing side by side.
So the European leaders should be in Ukraine today and not in Moscow. It seems we have now the Serbian president there, Vučić. We have the Slovakian or Fico? Yeah.
That's him.
And the Hungarian maybe also. I didn't see him in the footage, but I would speculate that he would also go to this. But
I don't know if Orban is there, but they probably sent somebody. I don't know. I'm admitting I don't know. I know Fico and Vučić are there.
Yeah, but Germany has taken a more, I would say, confrontational position in this. They also banned raising the Soviet flag now in Berlin's parade, for example, and they're coming after people in the streets for this. I think the political differences between these countries shouldn't really include the historical facts, right? And this is sending a wrong signal to the people, especially those who have suspicions about the historical records, right? Like some people completely negate what we have been told about World War II. They say everything we're told about World War II is a lie, right? And now with this attempt to politicize history, this is sending the wrong signal to these people who are trying to tell us that everything that happened in World War II where for example, was the mistake or was initiated by the Jews because they tried to blame everything that happened in World War II on the Jews. So the attempt to rewrite or politicize history, in my opinion, is helping the people who want to rewrite the history of World War II as well.
I think you're right. I think that's a very important point. I never thought of it. But if I understand you correctly, what you are saying is if everybody is now in the business of rewriting history as they think is appropriate for the current day, for the politics of the day, then people who are really extremely insane, right, and also want to rewrite it, will look around themselves and say, well, why can't I do it? Right? There's no standards left. And I think you're right about this. They're setting a very bad example, among other things. And you know what intrigues me about, for instance, the German behavior, or Callas, let's talk about her later. She's so insane. I mean, she's off the scale, right? But no, really, I think she's not quite there. But what intrigues me about the German behavior is that there are alternatives. Even within the current framework of confrontation, there are alternatives. It wouldn't be hard to communicate, for instance, a position that says, we will go to this parade, but we go to it because we want to show our respect to the single most important World War II ally, and that were the Soviets, who helped defeat Nazism. And this could be combined with being explicit and saying, this doesn't mean we agree on Ukraine. We still criticize Russia this way and that way. All of this could be done. One doesn't have to be so neurotic, right? One could be, as it were, generous and act in a sovereign manner, psychologically a sovereign manner, by saying, look, we can divide these things. We can come to your parade to set a certain signal. We will explain what we mean when we come to your parade, and we will also explain what we don't mean, right? Yes. This is our matter, what we don't mean, right? And this bizarre behavior of trying to completely block off the issue of what happened in World War II, so as to completely politicize this as basically a weapon in the current political struggle between these countries, that in and of itself is a sign of great, I would say, intellectual and ethical and political weakness. That's a great weakness, you know.
This requires them to go to Moscow and shake hands with Putin, right? So that's the problem, I think, with them not wanting to go there. But at the same time, I understand this argument.
Yeah, but
and they receive someone like Golani in Paris, and the next week or a week later, he's going to London, for example. So they're shaking hands with people who have blood on their hands.
Look, even that, they could address Moscow, of course, if they wanted to, right, beforehand. And they could say, look, we don't want a photo op with your president, but we are ready to come to the parade. We have something else in mind. Then Moscow could say, no, that's not okay, in which case they can stay away, but talk differently at home. Or Moscow might say, you know what, that's fine. You will be greeted by a minister or by, a deputy prime minister, of whom they have several. We won't make a big deal out of it. It's fine, just appear. So all of these things, if people want to be constructive, can actually be resolved. But your larger point is, of course, the enormous discrepancy, right, between shaking hands with Golani and pretending that you cannot come close to Putin. There's no comparison. Putin is a much more normal person and not a criminal like Golani, right? He's not. You could even make another comparison, which came to my mind when you mentioned that they're now going after people with Soviet flags. Now, don't get me wrong. Waving a Soviet flag is not my cup of tea. But I also don't think it's something that needs to be repressed. If somebody wants to do that on this day, in this context, I think it's acceptable. One can just let it be. So here we have a country where public buildings for a long time have displayed Israeli flags. I'm sorry, but the Israeli flag is a swastika of today because it's the flag of a country committing a genocide. Nazi Germany that had the swastika was committing a genocide. Displaying the Israeli flag is heinous. And to actually display the Israeli flag and do so proudly and have a problem with the Soviet flag of a state that doesn't even exist anymore is, again, completely ridiculous. It's just ludicrous. It doesn't come together anymore. So the point is really two things. The position that they're taking is wrong. That's one thing. Okay, one can argue about this. But what is really unbearable is that it's not only wrong, it's totally inconsistent. And in moral terms, the word for inconsistent is hypocritical. It's very hypocritical. You can't shake hands with Golani and make a fuss about Putin. You can't fly the Israeli flag and make a fuss about the Soviet flag. This is hypocritical. It's ridiculous.
I remember one time, this was in 2020 or 2021, I was targeted by a Syrian national carrying the Golani's revolution flag, and he physically tried to assault me. And back then I asked the police, I said, the flag that he's carrying, do you know how many decapitations and slaughtering happened under this flag? So like carrying this flag and walking in the street, what does it indicate basically? And what is the difference between this flag and the Al-Qaeda flag, which is they were fighting together? And he told me, no, but you're in a free country. You can raise the flags. This is called freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And now I'm wondering about this statement from this police officer back then. So
can you raise a Palestinian flag? Can you raise a Palestinian flag in Germany? No.
I mean, people are beating up.
Yeah, they're trying, but even the police in Berlin intervenes against a mere Palestinian flag, the flag of people who are being genocided, while it's okay to display the flag of the genociders, the Israelis. That's Germany today. So they have no moral standing to make decisions about flags, frankly.
Oh, let's stay in Germany, Tarik. We have the future foreign minister. Am I pronouncing his name correctly? His name is Wadefull?
Wadefull. I think so, yes.
Yeah, so
Johann, I think. Johann, right? Johann Wadefull, I think.
Yes, Johann Wadefull, he will become probably the foreign minister of Germany. It seems that this was last year or 2 years ago, he was pranked by a Russian comedian duo, Vovan and Lexus, and both known for their phone pranks. So they called him, and Wadefull's statement was, quote, Russia will always remain an enemy for us. However, the war in Ukraine may end. So the Zeitung or the newspaper says this reveals more about the new foreign minister than he would like to. However, he also has different other statements, and I'm trying to see what he says in public and what he says behind closed doors when he thinks he's being on a private phone call, for example. He also spoke in favor of negotiations with Russia. He says, of course, we have to step up efforts to reach a peace agreement. However, this is the willingness of the Kremlin ahead for talks. It was not there at the time and is only limited today. That is why there could be no peace talks in the short term, said Wadefull in October. And that is why we are on the side of Ukraine as long as this is necessary. Who reads between the lines? The future foreign minister leaves open whether the Europe side-to-side applies until the Ukraine victory or until peace negotiations are concluded. Then he has a post on X, this is in early April, he emphasized the unconditional duty of political leadership to clearly name the enemy. This is what he says. The most acute threat to us, to our lives, to the legal system, but also to the physical lives of all people in Europe is now Russia. As supporters of Ukraine, we have a responsibility to speak out more strongly on the threat it poses. This is a leadership task, he says. He's naming Russia as an enemy, right? Am I getting him correct here?
Well, he uses the word threat, but I think you're right that what he's creating is what, sociologists call an enemy image, right? Or what they call in German a Feindbild, right?
Yes.
So that's very clear. That's very clear. And de facto, he's naming them as an enemy. And in this conversation with the two Russian pranksters, he did precisely that. He said literally find the enemy, right? They will always remain the enemy for us, no matter how the war ends. Now, one question is, what does this guy really think? What does he really believe? Does he know? Maybe he doesn't. He's a politician. He may not have one real belief, It may change very quickly or more slowly, but he may be very changeable. Now, one thing I think one can say is that when he talked about possible negotiations, right? I think when I look at the context, I don't think that's a very hopeful sign in his case, because as you know, really from the beginning of this conflict, or rather from the big escalation onward in 2022, a lot of people in the West have said, yeah, we do want to negotiate. And when you actually looked at what they meant by that, They meant we want to talk to Russia and tell Russia to give up on everything it wants and go home. That's the idea of negotiation, right? and so that's not a real negotiation. So the real question is, who is willing to give and take? Who is willing? That the more important term here is compromise. And I mean a genuine compromise where both sides have to let go of stuff. And as we discussed before, I think, on this show, the type of compromise you can have during a war, towards the end of a war maybe, depends on who's winning and who's losing, right? When one side has the advantage and the other side is on the back foot, then the side with the advantage will get more. They might still not get everything they wanted to begin with. They might still not get everything. But yes, the result will be skewed in their advantage. Look, this is not Russian. This is how politics has always worked. This is not a Russian specialty. This is not ruthless Moscow. And I can give you an example immediately that we all know. Look at how the Cold War ended. Look at how the Cold War ended. In essence, the Cold War ends because the leader of the Soviet Union, which was then, based on Russia really, came toward the West. Gorbachev approached the Americans, Reagan at the time, and said, I want to talk about ending this. And luckily, the Americans said yes. They said yes because Reagan said yes. A lot of Americans didn't want to say yes, but Reagan actually pushed this through on their side. So they start negotiating, and between about sort of 86, 87, and 89, the Cold War ends. It's definitely over by 89. But when you look how it ends very much in favor of the US. It doesn't end with a total defeat for the Soviets. There was no total winner or total loser in the Cold War. Many people claim that, but that's not what happened, because it was a negotiated end. It was a compromise. But when the Soviets negotiated the end to the Cold War, they did it from a position of weakness. That was very clear. They knew it too. And so they gave a lot away. A lot of Russians are still angry and say, you didn't have to give so much away. Maybe they're right. But structurally speaking, that the Soviets got the worst deal in the end was normal. You may not like it, but this is how it usually works. When there is an imbalance, right, in the war, the one who has the upper hand gets the better deal. The one who doesn't have the upper hand gets the worst deal. It's still a compromise. And this is precisely where the war between Russia on one side and Ukraine and the West on the other is now. Ukraine and the West are losing, Russia is winning. But Russia may still have reasons why it may want to end this quickly, and it may trade in some of the stuff it wants to end it quickly, but not so much, because they are winning. Whereas we, figuratively speaking, the West and Ukraine are losing. That's just a fact of life.
I think for this is the first conflict that I personally followed, where politicians and officials from the losing side are raising the bar of the compromise.
They are. This is a very Western thing now. They are so arrogant. They live in a world of delusions. It's really amazing. It's like there is a special rule that says we always win. Yeah. And then there is a second rule that says when we don't win, we also win. And the Russians are looking at this and they're like, no. Then we go on. Then we go on until you get it,
Yeah,
and that's
I think
where we are now.
Lavov is the one who expresses this idiocracy correctly. many of his statements. Guys, as you may know, we do weekly a podcast with Tarik Cyril Amar every Friday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. If you're enjoying this podcast, we appreciate it if you only hit the like button as you're watching this, because this reaches to more people to watch during the live stream and after the live stream. And if you're liking the content, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. And also, Tarik is publishing on his Substack, substack.com/@Tarik Cyril Amar. All the relevant links are in the description below. Tarik, we have a new chancellor now in Germany. After the second attempt of the election, he managed to do it. And now he is challenging the US government and telling them to stay out of his nation's domestic politics. And this comes after Trump's administration officials slammed the designation of Germany's second largest party, which I believe now is the first largest party, AFD, in polls, exactly, as an extremist organization. Following the move last week by Berlin's domestic intelligence agency, the Verfassungsschutz, US Vice President J.D. Vance said the German establishment had rebuilt the Berlin Wall. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in turn declared that the EU's largest economy has become a tyranny in this squeeze and called upon the German authorities to change course. So when asked about the possibility of AFD being outlawed in Germany altogether, Merz said that the German government needed to show restraint on the issue. 10 million AFD voters, you cannot ban them, Merz argued. So, I mean, on one side, so classification, but no banning. Or this is the first step.
I don't know. Look, there are several questions here, right? One is, let's begin at the end, right? You rightly raised the issue of they have now classified them in the worst way possible, right? There are several levels. This is the worst level. And we know, everybody agrees that if they want to ban a party, then this classification would help them do it, right? So this is something that has a certain degree of reality now. However, it's also true that the classification itself is not a ban, right? You can still vote for the AfD. You can still be a party member. These are not crimes. The AfD can still exist. However, there is, for instance, already an issue with being a party member and being a public servant. Exactly. And the AfD is very worried about this, and rightly so, because the AfD, I was reading a very interesting article in the Spiegel today about this, and they talk to AfD people anonymously. But it makes sense what they're saying. And they were saying, look, we wanted more members who are public servants. We wanted people who work in the bureaucracy, who are judges, who are in the police, and so on. Now, I'm not an AfD fan, right? I find this scary, but I find a lot of things scary.
But you would expect lots of AfD supporters joining the police, right? This is the right place, probably.
and there are probably a lot of them that actually vote AfD, but don't say so, right? Okay, so let's be realistic. But here's the thing. By putting this sort of classification on it as right extremist, right? That means that if you are a public servant, you may actually lose your job over being a member. That may happen to you already. And so that's a big disincentive, a deterrence, and it's, I think, very unfair. I feel it's extremely unfair, and it's wrong. But although I don't like the AfD at all. But here's the other thing. The things that Vance have done and Rubio, right? I can't stand these guys either. But Vance is objectively right. I made the same point many times. In fact, when he said it, I was like, maybe he's reading my stuff because it's so obvious, though, right? The AfD dominates what used to be East Germany now. You can like this, you can dislike it. But the fact is that if you discriminate politically against the AfD, you are automatically discriminating regionally. You're discriminating against the former East Germany. You are. That's the way this falls out now on the map. And that is, in terms of regions, the most sensitive, the most dangerous fault line to German stability. So again, it makes no sense to do this, to put so many East Germans in this insane position. And I tell you again, I do not like the AfD, but this is still wrong. So Vance has a point. Now, it's of course funny when people from America tell Germans about democracy, right?
Oh, yes.
Because frankly, both the Germans and the Americans sit in glass houses on this, both of them. In Germany, the freedom of opinion is under serious threat. It's so threatened that even The Economist, the extremely conservative liberal Economist, has written about this, is there a threat to freedom of opinion in Germany because of people like Faeser and all of our politicians who are harassing and terrorizing their citizens through the police, through the courts, and so on, and who don't want to be criticized in public anymore. There's a real issue. So that's a very undemocratic thing. The way that Merz pushed through the change to the debt brake, which he has de facto changed, was completely undemocratic. If this had happened somewhere in Russia, we would say, look at this maneuvering deep state, you know. He used a parliament that had been voted out already. that was absolutely scandalous, right?
Yeah.
It reminded me of 1990s Russia, or of Ukraine, actually, this sort of maneuver. You know what Javier Solana, who used to work for the EU a long time ago, once said about Ukraine? He said the problem with Ukrainian politicians is they want to play with rules and not by rules.
By the rules, yeah.
And this is exactly what Merz has done. And everybody who allied with him, from the SPD to and so on, have done precisely that when they conducted this maneuver. And one reason why it took him 2 tours is that people were paying him back for that, and rightly so. So the Germans, have huge issues. But of course, the Americans on the other side, they have never had a democracy.
Yeah.
Please. No, obviously not. It's an oligarchy. Always has been one. If there is a moment in American history where America, the USA, as it really exists, came close to democracy, I can tell you exactly from when that started, in the mid-60s. And not because of some hippies or something, because in the mid-60s, you have legislation that, at least in theory, makes it clear that Black people too have a real right to vote, not something that can still be suppressed. Before that, they were de facto disenfranchised in all of the southern states. If you disenfranchise such a large group, you don't have a democracy. It does not exist. It doesn't exist. It's not there. You don't fulfill basic criteria. So until the 1960s, the US was not a democracy. I mean this very seriously. I teach my students that too, by the way, right? I also teach them that Israel has never been a democracy. Because, for one thing, apart from genocide and apartheid, they rule over 7 million Palestinians who can't vote. That's not a democracy. So the US isn't a democracy. Germany is an extremely endangered democracy, and they're going after each other. What can you say about this? Right?
Yeah, it feels that way.
But Vance has a point. He has a point about the Berlin Wall, because what he meant is that this attack on the AfD is de facto massive discrimination against East Germans, and that's true. That's true.
And the East Germans were part of the communist East Germany, right?
Of course, there has been migration and things have changed a little, but a lot of stuff is still also there, and it sort of still has inertia, right? Everybody admits. I mean, I read this today in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Germany's paper of record for the centrist right? It doesn't get more staid and boring than the FAZ. So they admit that East and West Germany have not yet been unified successfully.
Yes.
They admit that. And it's true. So there still is this shadow of the former East Germany. And if the AfD dominates there, and if then the rest of Germany goes after the AfD, then East Germans must feel they're coming after us.
Yes.
They have a point.
And they're helping AfD. I think last week we also spoke about one of the politicians from the Linke Party, the left, Heidi Reichinnek, and you said, I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, I think you compared it to AOC.
Yeah,
and
I feel confirmed.
I think today when I read this article, I can confirm that this is so true. The way they're describing her, the same way when they described AOC like she was a bartender, a cool girl, and then she went into politics, and they're speaking about
Heidi
her
has tattoos, and she's on TikTok. Oh, so
they're talking about her radical tattoos here and how she revolutionized politics and all the photos. I think the press is doing a lot of push up for her in the press, but
they used to,
there's an entire paragraph about her tattoos here.
Kevork, you said this, I think. They used her to destroy the BSW.
Yes,
she was. You know what they call this in Eastern Europe? There's a name for people like her. It's called a technical candidate.
Yeah,
it's a candidate that's invented to destroy another candidate or another party. Right? And that's exactly what she also has been. I know she has a lot of fans in Germany. Before she helped Merz get elected, I was trying to be very fair, but I have to say now I think the evidence is in. She's a sellout. She's a sellout. I'm done.
Because she helped Merz elected, right?
Yeah.
And this is a backlash she received by the BSW as well, because as you rightfully saw.
Maybe you should explain this very quickly, right? I'm not saying, you're not saying that her party gave Merz her votes or their votes. That's not what happened. What happened is when he failed in the first round, he needed a 2/3 majority of parliament to get the second round done on the same day. It's called a Fristverkürzung. Let's not go into details. He needed 2/3 of parliament to get a second round on the same day, and she made that possible. She made that possible, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She enabled him to get a second chance. She knew it. And this whole talk that we hear now, did you see the guys from the CSU and the CDU, Spahn and the guy from the CSU, how they come out later? We want to thank the Linke. We want to thank the Linke. And now they're talking about canceling this irreconcilability resolution, this Unvereinbarkeitsbeschluss, which basically means you can never work with them at all. And now already the reward is coming. They're saying, hey, look, these guys, one can work with them. You know what? They're right. Heidi can be worked with. Heidi can be worked with.
Yes. And this is why the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, they have mocked her. And in one of her statements, she says, like, she wants to destroy the Kapitalismus zerstören. Yeah. And then she's herzlichen Glückwunsch, Herr BlackRock.
she deserves it. No, this was her chance to make it hard for them, and she should have, and she deserves it.
Yeah,
this was I think this is who she really is. She's a climber. She's a climber.
Yeah, the control opposition in within the parties, like AOC, Tlaib, Rashida Tlaib. In my opinion, she's also control opposition.
Is there anybody who isn't? I mean, Sanders is maximum control.
Of course. You know, of course. And I think he's the most hypocritical one, because he had a long record in opposition of being on the opposition side.
What, they're also awful. I can't rank them.
I don't think, to be honest with you, there are elections, but I believe that someone to reach to position like Sanders or AOC or the Tlaib and the others, they really need the endorsement within the party, right? To rise in the party positions, to be in the right list. And this is not going to happen unless they are controlled opposition. Like, this is the party of Clinton, this is the party of Biden. It's not like they let them play.
He's formally an independent, forget it. He's networked in. Of course.
Yeah. I'm always suspicious of these radical voices in the establishment parties who want to be, the opposition in the party itself. I believe that they are the control opposition. They attract votes before the elections, and after the elections, you see that the main headlines, they are always in line with the empire. There is no time that I've seen this squad, for example, in the US, voting or being on the right side of history when it comes to really serious issue. Like,
Never.
That's the problem, in my opinion. Yeah. Oh, Tarik, we were speaking about Germany, and I want to bring our audience's attention to some sane voices, basically coming from Germany, and those are German companies basically talking to their government. German companies operating in China are calling on Germany's new federal government in Berlin to adopt a more pragmatic and forward-looking policy approach toward China, emphasizing partnership over rivalry. According to the German Chamber of Commerce in China on Wednesday, despite geopolitical headwinds, German firms remain committed to China. According to a survey, 50% plan to increase their investment in China over the next 2 years. I mean, I think this is a double-edged sword, right? German investment in China is great. However, Germany is also trying to bring back maybe the investment in the country, or am I getting this correct?
I mean, look, I can't claim to be in any way an expert on German business in China. But I can tell you something from my own life, which is fairly long already. When I was very young, I remember a distant relative of mine who was a very smart man and a lawyer and whatever. And he one day talked about China and German industry, and he had a certain connection to industry and things like that. And I remember very well that he didn't do it in an arrogant way. He was a good person, but he basically, his whole perspective was, this is such a huge market, and we should really work with them, and we will sell so many things to them, right? In a decent way. But I look back on this, and I'm like, look how the world has changed.
Yes.
This isn't about China being our market anymore. This is about China itself having a third of world manufacturing.
Yes.
And some of it is top-notch technology.
Yeah.
They have outdistanced the Germans, for instance, on electric cars. They can build chips the Germans can't build, by far not, and so on, right? So this whole old-fashioned idea that was about in certain German circles that, yeah, we want to work with them because we want to sell our stuff to, billions of people, that's already gone. Forget that. Any type of cooperation has to be much more sophisticated and much more balanced, right?
Yes.
And the good side of the story is the Chinese aren't stupid. They're self-confident. They're patriotic. And they understand all of this. And they will not allow anybody to play games with them anymore, right? So if the Germans want to work with the Chinese, which I think is great, I think they should, then the Germans will have to accept that we can't afford people like Annalena Baerbock. We can't afford idiots who travel to China and try to lecture the Chinese, which is like a mouse trying to fight an elephant by now. It's ridiculous. So if we learn some humility, if we learn this is at best for us a relationship between equals, and in reality the Chinese would do us a favor to see it that way, then this is a great idea. Then this is a great idea.
Now Annalena Baerbock will be out of the cabinet.
Yes, but
and
I mean,
the new
we can't have another one.
The other day,
you think she's the last of her kind?
The other day, I was speaking to a friend, and he votes for AFD, and he told me, "Who are we going to mock now if Annalena Baerbock is leaving the cabinet?" And this new foreign minister, he says, is more classical, old school foreign minister.
Yeah, I mean, he did a big faux pas with Wovan Lexus, but that's not the same. We will have to see, We will have to see.
We will have to see, but it would be, I think, mutually beneficial if Germany engages in good business and industrial relationship with China.
Absolutely.
I think
as much as we can.
Yeah,
as much as they let us, please.
I'm really fussed, sometimes about the insistence on the same policy over and over again and expecting different results, especially when it comes to China. I mean, China never harmed the European continent. They didn't invade any European country, and they're not destabilizing this continent. And
it's not true the other way around, right?
Yeah,
they're quite tolerant towards us, given our history.
I mean, Tarik, to be honest with you, sometimes I go to Chinese tech shops here in where I live, and I'm fascinated with the technology they are producing there and the prices, right? That's why they're imposing lots of taxes on the Chinese products. Like the other day, I believe, if guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think Toyota produced for the first time an electric car from the supply chains of China, and they were able to build a car that cost 15,000. I would just stay with me because this is very important. And they were $15,000 electric car, China. I think this is So this is something that is mind-boggling for many, and this is coming from Toyota, right? So this is Toyota's cheapest car. Toyota's cheapest EV ever cost 15,000, gets 10,000 orders in 60 minutes. And this is because China is quickly establishing itself as a global epicenter for affordable electric vehicles, and for good reason. However, most of the budget-friendly EVs have come from homegrown brands that have been able to work around the traditional constraints that have slowed down legacy automakers. But now even Toyota, a legacy company that's been criticized for its sluggishness in adopting electric vehicles, is jumping into the fray with the shockingly low starting price in the Chinese market, especially considering its size and features.
That's really
so this is a vehicle which costs $15,000, and this is an SUV. It's not like a small car, and because they have manufactured it through Chinese supply chains. So this is a lesson that cars can be cheaper, right? Like I remember.
For a long time.
Do you remember the video of Annalena Baerbock when she speaks about electric cars, and the little child asks her, so what is going to be the future? She says it's going to be electric. But this small kid, he's like 5 years old or something, and he asks her, but they're going to cost more, right? And she says, yeah, they're going to be more expensive than the ones now. And the small kid says, so the future is only for the rich people and not for the poorer people. And she doesn't have this is hilarious. And Annalena Baerbock, I think, kid electric car. This video shows you that where we could be heading for. Meanwhile, the cars are becoming very, very expensive here. People are spending hell of a money, like that they can buy.
The Greens have long been a party of the middle to upper bourgeoisie. That's who they really are. A lot of the Greens and the voters are earning very well, and they may. That's fine, but they are also a party, and you can really see this in their attitudes and their politics. Who find it always very easy to impose extra costs on people, because you can really tell they have the habitus, they have the habits of people who always have a lot of extra cash just sloshing around. So if you say to them, yeah, your car is going to cost 5-10% more, they're very generous. They're like, okay, I can do that, because they really don't feel it. It doesn't hurt them at all.
This is like boiling the frog, you know? And look, this is the video. I found it for you.
Muss auch wissen, dass es in Zukunft immer teurer wird, damit die Menschen sich sauber Autos kaufen, damit man es bezahlen kann, gibt es Unterstützung.
Also Reiche können so viel Auto fahren, so viel sie wollen.
Ja, und Arme können auch so viel Auto fahren, wie sie wollen. Das schreibt ja die Politik nicht vor. Aber
die haben ja nicht so viel Geld.
Das stimmt.
She's got to explain. This kid has to explain it to her. The kid has to explain to her the economic constraints are real. The answer is, politics doesn't matter for that. You know, it's like, but you know, the money. The kid.
For those who didn't understand German, like they're talking about electric cars, and she says cars will be more expensive in the future because they will be cleaner. And the kid says, but like the poor, you know, what about the poor? Yeah, the poor also can buy cars, but they're going to be more expensive, right? How are they going to buy? She's like, the future
but
is...
listen, we are not rid of her. As you know, she's going to another prominent position because she was such a great foreign minister. She has to go to the UN, you know, and she kicked out the German diplomat who actually was on schedule for that position. She kicked her out, right? Her. By the way, feminist foreign policy is when you steal the position of another woman. That's feminist foreign policy.
Nice.
I mean, Baerbock for me is the lowest of the low, not only intellectually, ethically too. The lowest.
Tarik, last week, if you remember, at the end of the conversation, I played a short video of CIA footage they posted on several social media platforms, basically encouraging and inviting Chinese officials from the Communist Party to become spies for the CIA. This week, however, the Chinese internet responded to this ridiculous video of the CIA with another video basically mocking the CIA. Let's take a look.
My name is John. I used to believe this country was a beacon of freedom. I work hard, going out early and coming back late every day, for my family, for my kids. But what's the reality? I've been working my ass off for 20 years, yet I can't even afford my kids' medical bill. A government told me hard work pays off. But all I see is that Wall Street elites are manipulating the finance. Politicians are taking bribes. And it seems like Israel is the real power pulling the strings behind.
Oh my God, they mentioned it. Oh my God.
They say
What dare they?
Look at those scandals. Politicians are blatantly corrupt for votes and money. Behind every scandal, countless amounts of money disappear. Who took that money? Not me, not you. It's those people up high. But I don't want to stay silent anymore. The politicians in this country are completely rotten. Those corrupt politicians.
You know?
It looks so real.
Yeah.
We have 20 more seconds. Let's take it.
Blood-sucking elites. I want the world to see that America's freedom is nothing but a lie. I choose to stand up. I'm doing this for my kids and for all the ordinary people who've been cheated. This time, I'll fight for a real future in my own way. Change this country in my own way.
at the end it's a little bit
different.
It's
In a
with a
very
gun, huh?
scary
Like
way.
fight for your freedom.
Yeah, because look, they were thinking, I think it's understandable, because the Chinese look at America, and I think what the sound at the end is supposed to mean is a gun being prepared for firing,
Yes.
right?
I think
And
civil war.
Civil war, something
yeah.
like that. And I think some people will say, oh, that's terrible. But you know what? If you look at the US from outside, not only from China, you see a nation obsessed with and awash in guns. The US, a lot of people don't know this, they have more than one gun per person, not per adult, per person in civil hands, more than one per person. Right? And of course, they're not evenly distributed. Some of these nutcases have 15 and some have none, and they will have a bad time in the civil war, So I can understand that the Chinese are basically looking at this and they're saying, yeah, when an American rebels, it's not going to be about calling a spy service. It's going to be about taking a gun, because that's their nature. That's their culture. That's where they are.
I think if I was born in the US, Tarik, I would be living in a place where guns are allowed.
But they're allowed everywhere, de facto. You can have, look, the fact is, even the cities or the states or the small jurisdictions that have harsher laws, it doesn't help you at all, because everybody can drive anywhere and buy what they want. You don't get it in state X. You drive over the state border, you go to one of these free gun fairs. It's like these big fairs. They sell. Yes. You can get it at the Walmart. I mean, it's insane. It's an insane country in that way, as in many others. But the gun thing, it's completely... Look, my wife is American, as you may know. And one reason why she doesn't want to live in the US anymore, and she's serious, is that she doesn't want our daughter to be in a country with so many guns. She rightly says, there's no protection from this. There isn't, because you never know when the next idiot walks into a school. Now, it happens in other countries too. I know this. But there's something about the frequency and the total helplessness of the state. The state isn't only helpless, it actually is promoting this culture. That is special. That is very special.
Yes. Tarik, this was the end of our brilliant conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning into today's stream. There are 2 more videos coming today on Syriana Analysis. One of them is at 8 p.m. Central European time, 2 p.m. Eastern American time, which is a stunning 18th Victory Day parade in Moscow. It's going to be 1-hour footage from Moscow. I got it from viori.com, which is, I got the license and I just merged the videos together. And just for you, for entertainment purposes, guys, you can watch what is happening there. I'm sure if you're living in Europe or in the United States, it's not allowed for you to watch this stuff. And then at 11 p.m. at night, 5 p.m. Eastern American time, 11 p.m. Central European time, I will broadcast the interview yesterday done with me on The Redacted with Clayton and Natalie Morris, which is an amazing show. And they gave me an opportunity to explain what happened in Syria and Golani's visit to Paris. I really appreciate that. So this is the end, guys. We will see you on Monday, and we will see you with Tarik next Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.